Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for this reality check event entitled The Missing Layer in Industrial Cybersecurity. Let me open the webinar today with a question that tends to make rooms a little quiet when it's asked. If your board asked your CISO today to walk into one of your plants, pull up an OT network diagram, and explain exactly what systems are exposed and what would happen if one of them failed, how confident are you that the answer would be immediate and precise? For most organizations, the hesitation isn't about leadership quality. CISOs today are some of the most capable security leaders in the industry. The hesitation comes from something else. There is a layer of cybersecurity leadership that most traditional security careers were never designed to build. A layer that sits between enterprise security and industrial operations. And that missing layer is becoming one of the fastest growing sources of risk in critical infrastructure today. That's what we're here to talk about. I'm joined by two gentlemen who operate in that space every day. Terry McCorkle, CEO and founder at PhishCloud, and Chris Weule, Director of Operational Technology, Cyber Fusion, and Strategy at PhishCloud. They've worked inside real industrial environments alongside engineers, operators, and security teams where the consequences of getting security wrong are not theoretical. At any point during the presentation today, feel free to ask any questions in the Questions tab at the bottom right of your screen. We'll have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation and do our best to answer each question asked. So with that being said, let's get started. Terry, Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gary. So let's ground this in numbers first because the data is actually hard to ignore. In 2024, 73% of industrial organizations experienced some kind of cyber intrusion that impacted their OT systems. That's nearly 3 in 4. This is not a theoretical risk, it's an active, ongoing campaign, and manufacturing is now overtaking technology as the most targeted sector by adversaries, focused primarily on critical infrastructure. And when those attacks land, dual IT OT incidents now average $4.56 million in damages, and that's before you even count production downtime.
And the adversaries have evolved. CISA issued 241 new advisories in 2024 alone, impacting 70 vendors, triggering 619 ICS cert vulnerability disclosures. Nation-state actors, ransomware groups, hacktivists, they all understand that hitting OT doesn't just lock up data, it stops production. It can disrupt power grids, water systems, pipelines. Recent examples include attacks on US water infrastructure, ongoing disruption in Ukraine's power grid, and intrusions into the US electrical substations, all within the last 2 years. The threat is real, escalating, and the consequences go well beyond a data breach.
Here's the core problem, and it's not a technology problem. It's a knowledge gap. Most CISOs are exceptional at protecting data, hardening networks, managing compliance, but the skill set is really built on IT. And when a CISO leads an ICS or OT security event, 82% of those programs are mapped to recognized standards compared to just 42% of non-central governance. So CISO ownership absolutely matters. But knowing that you need to secure OT is very different from knowing how.
In IT, security priorities run confidentiality, integrity, availability. In OT, the order is completely flipped. Safety first, then availability. Because a compromised controller doesn't just leak data, it can injure workers or cause an environmental incident. Patching is another example. In IT, you patch first. In OT, patching a legacy controller may require a full production shutdown. And some systems literally cannot be patched because vendors no longer support decades-old equipment, or the hardware lacks the computing resources for modern security updates. A CISO applying IT instincts to an OT environment, even with the best intentions, can push policies that either create safety hazards or get rejected by the plant floor. Not because people are being difficult, but because it's really the wrong playbook for a completely different game. OT isn't just IT equipment in a factory. It's a separate engineering discipline with its own protocols, life cycles, failure modes, and really its own culture. OT systems are designed to last decades, and they often lack the built-in security features inherent in IT systems. We routinely encounter industrial controllers from the 1990s running unsupported operating systems, embedded in production that cost tens of millions to commission and simply just can't be replaced. These systems were designed to optimize reliability and uptime, not cybersecurity. Encryption, often unsupported by the equipment. Network segmentation, sometimes it's physically impossible without retrofitting the entire infrastructure. Access controls, frequently limited by the original system's design.
And the cultural dimension is just as important. OT teams such as plant engineers, process control specialists, and operations managers, they've spent their careers focused on one thing, and that's keeping production up and running. When IT security shows up with scanning tools, those tools can literally crash industrial controllers. So network scans and intrusion detection systems that work fine in a business network can inadvertently actually disrupt the critical timing of production systems. So OT teams really do resist a lot of security initiatives, not because they don't care, but because they're so the things that they've seen be well-intentioned and the IT tools cause problems in production. Bridging that requires someone who can speak both languages, walk the plant floor and have a credible conversation about Modbus and the Purdue model, and then turn around and brief the board on the risk exposure. That person is actually very rare, and it's the exact gap that we're seeing and what we're trying to solve here. Here's a stat that I think genuinely is underappreciated. More than 50% of ICS and OT workforce have less than 5 years of experience. And 51% are protecting these systems without having a relevant industrial certification. These people are responsible for securing the plant or your grid or your water treatment facility, have half of them with less field experience than your newest IT hire. Not because they're not capable, but because the field is young and the talent pipeline is thin. So it really demands accelerating far faster than the supply.
And this creates a very specific, very practical problem for CISOs. In 2025, 52% of organizations now place OT security under the CISO, up from just 16% in 2022, with 80% planning to follow that same path. The structural accountability shift is happening fast, but it doesn't automatically come with expertise to execute it. Hiring a full-time OT security executive costs well over $279,000 annually in base compensation alone, in one of the thinnest talent markets in all of cybersecurity. Most organizations are trying to solve a specialized, high-stakes problem with a generalist approach, and that's the missing layer. An OT vCISO is a fractional, specialized executive who sits alongside your existing CISO and fills the specific gap in industrial security leadership. It's not a consultant who writes a report and disappears. It's a deeply experienced security expert providing the same level of expertise as a full-time hire on a flexible, right-sized engagement basis. The OT specialization matters. This is someone who, with deep knowledge of IEC 62443, NIST SP 882, NERC SIP, and the operational credibility to work with your engineering team, not just your security team.
In practice, the OT vCISO will start with a proper asset assessment, mapping what's actually in your environment, where it's exposed. And many OT environments are actually lacking that strong asset inventory due to limited visibility, unmanaged networks, a shortage of telemetry compatible with modern security tools. So this alone is a revelation. From there, an OT security roadmap for your CISO your CISO can own that and champion that. OT specific response plans, because they need to be created, because recovering from an OT environment looks nothing like recovering in an IT environment. So regulatory and compliance support and ongoing governance that keeps the program current as it evolves, they're required. The goal isn't to take anything away from the CISO. It's actually to extend their reach into a domain that requires specialized experience and gives them coverage that to lead those areas confidently, which is where a lot of CISOs are lacking that knowledge. So let's talk about one of the most important things an OT vCISO does for a CISO. And it doesn't happen on the plant floor, it actually happens in the boardroom. The board is increasingly asking about OT risk. Regulatory bodies are asking, cyber insurance companies are asking, and right now, most CISOs are in an uncomfortable position because the data, the posture assessment, and the business language translation simply haven't been done. And OT vCISO helps change that.
Here's what you get. First, OT risk quantified in business terms, not just CVE scores, but production loss exposure, regulatory fine risk, and safety liability translated into language that a board actually responds to. Second, a real compliance posture against the frameworks that matter in OT. NIST 800-82, IEC 62443, NERC SIP, with a gap analysis and a roadmap that the board can track progress against quarter over quarter. Third, and this one catches people off guard, cyber insurance readiness. Insurers are tightening OT requirements fast. Your OT vCISO documents the controls and the posture that support your coverage narrative and reduce your premium exposure. And they save you money. And fourth, peer benchmarking. How does your program compare to your industry peers? That context is what turns a budget conversation from why are we spending this into here's why we're investing appropriately. That's the ammunition you want walking into a board meeting.
There's really three things that drive the cases here. The risk reduction, cost efficiency, and strategic leverage. On risk reduction, organizations that implement OT security best practices such as segmentation, centralized governance, threat intelligence, have seen a 93% reduction in cyber incidents. And that's transformational. The cost of an OT incident dwarfs the investment in proactive leadership. On cost efficiency, staffing a comprehensive OT security program with full-time resources can exceed $1 million annually for salary alone. A fractional OT vCISO model is different, and the expertise is at a fraction of the cost. So it really helps you scale when you actually need it.
And the strategic leverage piece matters most for CISOs specifically. Right now, you're being asked to own a risk domain your career may not have fully prepared you for. And OT vCISO doesn't replace your authority. They extend your authority. They become your trusted translator for the industrial environment. They give you the confidence to brief the board credibly on OT risk. They give you the coverage to pass an OT-specific audit. Organizations that combine CISO leadership with OT-specific expertise and threat intelligence are 53% more likely to have full visibility into all exterior or external connections in their industrial environment. And that's visibility that is foundational for everything else. The OT vCISO is how you build it without gambling on a full-time hire in a market that simply doesn't have enough qualified people. So we've made the business case. The return on investment is real. The workforce gap is real. The board needs answers you can give them now. I want to pause here for just a second because I think it's easy to hear all of this and feel like you're looking up a very tall mountain. So let me reframe it. The organizations that are winning in IT security right now don't get there overnight. And they didn't get there by trying to solve everything at once. They got there because they had a clear picture of the destination and they moved forward with it methodically. That destination has 3 stages. It starts with visibility, just knowing what you actually have. It matures through governance, building the structure and trust that makes security stick. And it compounds into a level of maturity where security stops being a cost center and starts being a genuine competitive and operational advantage.
Yeah, and here's the thing. We've guided organizations through every stage of that journey. We know what the traps are. We know where organizations get stuck. And we know how to build programs that actually hold together when the pressure's on. So let's take a look at what those destinations actually look like in practice.
So, like I said, it starts with visibility. You know what assets you have, all of them, including equipment, vendors installed without fully documenting it. OT-specific monitoring has grown from 33% of organizations in 2019 to 52% today. And that visibility improvement is driving real security outcomes. It continues with governance. Your CISO owns the risk. Your OT vCISO provides domain expertise. Your plant team trusts the program because it was built with them, not imposed on them. Effective cross-functional security teams include security IT, OT engineering, physical security, risk management, and operations. And that structure is what makes security stick on the plant floor.
And the key is it matures continuously. Securing OT isn't a one-time project. It's an evolving discipline that requires sustained leadership as your environment changes. Regulatory requirements shift. And the digital transformation that brings new connectivity into previously isolated systems. The organizations winning in OT security today share one thing. They have the right expertise and leadership. They've closed the missing layer as they've looked at where their gaps are. The OT vCISO is how you get there methodically with a clear roadmap and with somebody who's done it before.
Okay, so here's what I keep coming back to. After years of working in this space, every organization we talk to understands the problem. They feel that gap. They know their CISO is being handed accountability for a domain that the industry hasn't fully prepared them for. And a lot of them are hoping that the problem will solve itself. I don't know, maybe that a new tool will appear, or a new hire will come along and solve the day for them, or that, you know, the threats will somehow slow down. It's not gonna, it won't. But the answer isn't complicated. It's a leadership and expertise problem, but it's a problem that is very solvable. Gary, back to you.
All right, great. Chris, Terry, thank you both. Great discussion today. Here's a quick summary of what we've covered. OT environments are under attack. The attacks are escalating with real financial and operational consequences. It's the IT/OT knowledge transfer that doesn't happen automatically. There's a genuine workforce gap that even the most capable CISOs can't immediately close alone. An OT vCISO is a practical, cost-effective model for filling that gap. And your board is ready to hear the story. You just need the right kind of support to tell it. If you found yourself thinking, well, we have that gap, you're not alone, number one. And the next step is a simple conversation with Terry and Chris, who happen to be great listeners, and they're eager to hear where you are today and work with you to develop a solution to move forward in that maturity model. You can contact us, or the contact information is in the chat session at the bottom right of your screen. Feel free to take a look at that and contact us to set up a executive briefing at your convenience. We have about 5 minutes left, and we have a few questions for Terry and Chris. So let's jump into those. Gentlemen, here's the first question. If a CISO came to you tomorrow and said, I honestly don't know where to start with OT security, what's the very first thing you'd tell them to do?
I can jump in on that. So one of the biggest challenges we see in cybersecurity today, or especially in the OT cybersecurity arena, is that there's not a proper asset inventory. And if you don't know where things are and what they are, how they work, it's very difficult to protect those. So still, most organizations, they've invested money into it. They have applications that are designed to help them track those systems, but they aren't necessarily monitored with the same rigor that an IT network would be. The other key is every OT network has IT networks as part of it. So you can't just look at the OT devices. You have to look at the environment as a whole and understand exactly how an attacker may gain access to this environment. And that's where we see a lot of companies fall down as far as detection and identifying threats, as they don't have a good inventory.
Okay, great. Next question. You mentioned that IT security tools can literally crash industrial controllers. Can you walk us through what that actually looks like in practice and what the fallout is if that happens?
I'm going to take that one, and I'm tempted to let Terry take it since he used to do red teaming, and has done this thing, Terry. Okay, so a network scanner doing a routine sweep hits a legacy PLC that wasn't designed to handle that volume of traffic, and the controller locks up or reboots. It's fairly simple. Or you send it the wrong byte code, and it interprets a byte code in a specific way, and it doesn't have logic in there to go ahead and interpret the bytecode properly. And so, what might have been the beginning of a header suddenly becomes a shutdown sequence or a fail sequence. Now, in a factory, that might mean a line goes down, right? And then you end up having to, you've got a brick and you have to replace that with an actual operating controller again, which gets expensive. But in a water treatment facility or a power substation, it can mean something far more serious. Now, we've seen it happen with well-intentioned teams who simply don't know the environment that they were working in. It's not out of malice. It's just the wrong tool in the wrong place. We mentioned earlier that it's the wrong playbook for the wrong game.
And I'll throw out just a little additional information. There's, in the operational technology industry, there are a lot of different protocols, and those protocols have vulnerabilities and issues of their own. They don't necessarily have the same protective mechanisms that a traditional TCP/IP stack would have on a computer. So it can be an issue with the way that the code was written. It can be an issue with the network stack. There's a lot of things that can go wrong if you're just running a traditional IT scan in an OT environment. And while I've never actually ran a scan to crash anything in production, I have seen organizations that have, and organizations that have tested it and bricked, $20,000 PLCs because they didn't understand that. So I've spent a portion of my career actually writing safe scanning technologies for OT environments, but it's important to understand that even a good solution is only going to be a 50% solution, because you'll only be scanning known safe things, and the rest of it is a manual task to identify and make sure you understand what these different devices do in that environment.
Terry's still a red teamer and probably always will be. Here's a good question for you, gentlemen. What's the pushback you hear most often from CISOs when OT security comes up, and how do you respond to it?
It's a good question. So from a pushback, I think the biggest challenge is many CISOs are kind of starting on the ground level. They've got an introduction to some of the compliance issues. Maybe they understand they can't manage it the same as they manage their IT network. But the reality is a CISO oftentimes doesn't understand the full impact of how a security incident can actually cause issues in an OT environment. So there's a bit of a knowledge gap there. And it seems like many of them are still in the stage where they're just trying to figure out what they need to do to have a pen test to figure out their vulnerabilities. We recommend other options to look at that besides just a pen test to check the box, because you need to understand a lot more about your environment than just what a pen test will actually show you.
Great. We're just about out of time, so I'm going to ask one additional question. And this one's from me. We spoke with a vCISO a week ago who told us that many CISOs out there view the concept of an OT vCISO as competition rather than as a complementary role to assist them in making sure both IT and OT is secure. How do you respond to a CISO who views it competitively rather than complementary?
Terry, I'm going to leave that one to you. You're the boss.
All right. So I think one of the challenges is really the knowledge gap, right? Most CISOs or vCISOs that are out there, they may have a good practice, a good strong, understanding of an IT network. Maybe they understand, even how the IT and OT networks work together. The key here with having a fractional OT vCISO help and assist is that they will understand the technologies and protocols and some of the things that get under the hood of those OT environments, right? They also understand one of the biggest challenges, and that is how do you translate an IT security initiative into an OT security, requirements, and how do you make sure that the OT side and the IT side are speaking the same language, because they really speak two different languages, as Chris alluded earlier. The OT department, engineering based, they like things to be structured. The IT security side has the same kind of requirements, but comes at it, like we said, from a different perspective, availability versus confidentiality. So you have to be able to translate between the two organizations and come to a middle ground. And working with organizations doing things like tabletop exercises and actually walking through the roles of these different organizations in an incident helps shine a lot of light on where those kind of gaps are. But for a CISO, a vCISO that's out there looking to understand their environment better, especially on the OT side, that's where the OT fractional CISO can really come in and assist.
Great. Well, thank you, gentlemen. That's going to do it for us today. I appreciate both of you for your time. This was a very practical, direct, exactly the kind of clarity that organizations need and are looking for right now. For those on the call, we've made available to you in this webinar a copy of our executive brief entitled "The Missing Leadership Layer in Industrial Cybersecurity." This brief details how the OT vCISO strengthens cyber resilience across both IT and OT. It dives deeper into what Terry and Chris presented today. You can also download this document by visiting phishcloud.com, and also there you can sign up for an executive brief session with Terry and Chris. Here's the takeaway I want everyone to leave with today. This threat isn't slowing down. The accountability is shifting to the CISO, and the gap between responsibility and specialization is growing, not shrinking. The organizations that close that gap deliberately are the ones that will lead. The ones that assume it will resolve itself will eventually be forced to react under great pressure. The missing layer in industrial cybersecurity isn't a tool. It isn't a platform. It isn't another assessment. It's leadership in the right domain, expertise at the right level. And the good news is that problem is very solvable. Thank you again for being here. You'll receive the recording shortly, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. Take care.